Camera, action, yeah? Just out of curiosity, who is here Dutch speaking? Who's English speaking? Okay, I'll do it in English, no problem. And I'll try to be a little bit louder than the people outside this room, which is going to be interesting. What I'm going to try and do today, ladies and gentlemen, is explain a few initiatives that are currently ongoing in terms of, let's say, cybersecurity, that also Dutch companies can take advantage of if and when they're interested in trying out certain, let's say, technologies before seriously investing in them. And I have to be sticking a little bit to the keyboard because the remote isn't working, but that should not be a problem. So there will be a number of logos and names popping by, and I will not explain them into detail. Two reasons. Part of it I also don't know, and second of it, I don't want to bore you. But what's important is that part of what I will be presenting is part of the European Digital Innovation Hub. And that's actually a network of digital innovation hubs in Europe, where basically there are also a number of them in the Netherlands, all focused on, let's say, different types of digitalization and supporting companies, typically SMEs, in their quest for, let's say, making the next steps in their digitalization. My story will be about EDIH NL, so it's a European Digital Innovation Hub, South Netherlands, which is here located in Tilburg, but it's actually in Eindhoven, but okay, that's slightly not that important. But we have also hubs on smart farming, smart services. There is one on government. There is one for construction, civil engineering. So there are a number of these support organizations that can help companies in their quest for, let's say, the next generation digitalization and how they can benefit from it. One of them is also in Dutch known as Klik op Morgen. I did not come up with the name, but basically this is the European Digital Innovation Hub on, let's say, smart manufacturing in the south of the country, and that means for the provinces of Zeeland, Brabant and Limburg, and let's say the adjacent regions. In this context, they have something which is called test before invest. And a lot of organizations, they are very, especially the SMEs, they are very interested in making a next step, whether it's AI, or whether it's IoT, or whether it's robotics, or cybersecurity. But a small SME, it's typically very expensive to simply do these kind of things and then a few months later come to the conclusion that it was, well, not what they had hoped from it. So in the context of the EDIH SNL, they have something called Test Before Invest. And we have them on two topics, cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. And that basically means if a company in the region that is related to, let's say, manufacturing industry or high-tech industry or anything adjacent to that wants to do some experiments in that area, they can go to the EDIH and they can basically join one of the programs that we have to help them. Today I will say something about the cybersecurity part, because on the AI part, that's of my colleague, and I have no clue what they are specifically doing. What we do in terms of cybersecurity, we have a SOC, Security Operations Center. The university actually in Eindhoven, where I work, has two. We have a normal production SOC that typically does our own security, but we also have a SOC that we also use for research and education, and also to try and make the relevant technologies for security operations centers, let's say, to innovate them. It's a public-private partnership. We do only part of it, but that's the important part, of course. And for some of the other parts, we use partners. For instance, typically with a SOC, you also have a response team or an incident response team. That's something that we don't do, but there are other organizations that do that. As I mentioned, within the University in Eindhoven, which is partner in the EDI, we basically have something which is called the Eindhoven Security Hub. We do that together actually with Fontys University of Applied Sciences. And that's actually a fully grown, normal SOC, as you can also acquire them from, or that you can do business with some of the parties that are here also on the fair. Typically, why do we want to do that? Because a university typically doesn't really provide a lot of commercial services. One reason is we use this to also validate our own research. Second of all is we can experiment with innovative solutions in practical contexts, and typically with a lot of the parties that we do these experiments with, for them it's really let's say an opportunity to, together with the people that actually know what they're talking about, to have a experiment, a practical, let's say, experiment at their own organization. How would it be if, as a company, you would take this kind of technology for your cybersecurity, your cyber resilience? I will not bore you too much with all the details, but to give you a few highlights in the sense is that, as I said before, it's based on an open public-private partnership, so also other partners can join the initiative. It's a closed lab at the university, because if it would be an open lab, typically we don't get people to share with us their data. Somehow people are very protective of their data. All the people that we deploy in the lab for third parties are employees. And that has to do also with all kinds of things like confidentiality and intellectual property rights. But of course, we also have a lot of research groups and students participating in the, let's say, the development of the next generation of SOC technology. But that's outside the work we do for, let's say, third parties. Yeah, I think that's clear. One of the key elements that SOCs typically have is professionals, is people. Because people typically need to look at the data, people need to be analyzing what's happening. But very often, if people have to do that work for 2, 3, 4 years, at a certain point of time, a lot of these people start thinking of changing jobs. So at a certain point in time, fatigue sets in. We try to make sure that, we actually try to avoid that by making sure that all students and all employees we have are basically, for the tier 1 at least, basically for just 1 year, and then we rotate them out. That also means that we have a lot of students that actually get extra training, extra supervision, extra experience. And on our side, it means that basically we have always, let's say, fresh, quote unquote, analysts. All the technology that we typically use is either open source, or if partners want to bring in their own technology, that's fine with us as well, because in that sense we're rather agnostic. Or we try to build everything on our own open source version. And yeah, we wouldn't be a university if we also wouldn't be looking at the scientific and innovative parts of it. Yeah, that's not so interesting. What I said, we typically, for a test before invest situation, we first need to make some agreements with the company that wants to do that, because it's about sharing data and confidentiality, etc. But once that is passé, then typically we take a hardware sensor that gets placed with the company. We don't get the data, it stays at the location of the company. And basically, we just have an interface to that. We, in our SOC, have a number of what we call tier 1 analysts, and they're basically looking at a lot of screens. And a lot of this technology is also supported by all kinds of AI solutions to make sure that, yeah, it's not just the human eye that looks at it, but that basically it's a combination of people and automation. And if something is noticed within the, let's say, certain service level agreement, then typically the company is notified that there is something going on. Now, that in itself, every SOC can do for you, or every SOC will do for you. So what's kind of now the interesting issue here? What we try to do is make sure that you go through this experience. We also make sure that we optimize the, let's say, the rules that are being applied for detecting potential attacks are optimized for your organization, for your network, for your, let's say, systems. And for a few months, you get this, let's say, these measurements, this monitoring, detection, and the notification. The key issue is not that we want to sell you the service, because after a few months, after the pilot, we take the sensor back, we give you the results, we give you basically also all the rules and the settings, the configuration, and with that you should be able, if you're interested, simply to go to a commercial provider and say, this is what I would like to have. But then you already had the experience, and hopefully a positive one of course, on whether a SOC is something for your organization to basically increase the cybersecurity of your organization. Eventually, throughout these pilots, they typically take 3, 4, 5 months max. There will be, let's say, we will be knocking on your door saying something is wrong, or at least we observe something that might be wrong. Then we do a deep dive together with you to see if it's really something wrong. You never know. Doesn't always need to be the Chinese or the Russians, but still somebody could be fiddling on your network. And especially for organizations that have slightly, let's say, not necessarily all standard technology, also very often standard solutions don't work. So it's in particular in those cases where these kind of, let's say, dedicated rules, etc., are playing a very big role to make sure that the number of false positives, so the number of times that you get notified that something is wrong when actually something isn't wrong, is kept to a minimum. Because typically if people get too many false positive notifications, after, I don't know, let's say 5, they just pull the plug and think, yeah, you know, let's not do this again. As I said, we have a number of different types of analysts. Nothing special, simply tier 1 that looks at all the data, tier 2, and eventually you have a person that makes sure that we inform you if something is deemed, let's say, an anomaly that is potentially an attack. I will definitely not go through all the elements here, but interesting could be, again, it's not something that we try to sell you a product, because we don't really have a product. What we try to do is together make sure that we optimize this entire SOC monitoring for your organization with your either IT organization or the person who is responsible for it, and to make you get a first experience of how it would work before you, let's say, take the big step and take a commercial SOC as an investment, because yeah, it also costs some money. We also do this, actually, as I said before, with a lot of, let's say, temporary workers, all still on the payroll, but still students. This setup is currently also being copied towards Apeldoorn, where it's a collaboration also between the University of Twente, the Saxion Hogeschool, and the Police Academy. And we're also setting a similar thing up in The Hague together with the Hague University of Applied Sciences to actually be able to offer everywhere, let's say, some of these experiences. Yeah, I will not bore you with architectural aspects, because I think that that's not necessarily everybody's biggest interest. As I said, your system, your data stays at your organization, doesn't travel to us. We sometimes take a peek in because else we can't do any analysis. And it's basically all separated per customer. So that basically whenever you think, well, I want to do something like this, it's really, let's say, exclusive. And this is really not for today. If you're interested, EDI as an organization, so the European Digital Innovation Hub, a number of them offer these kind of services. If you're interested in the south of the Netherlands, you can always find me at the booth or send an email. If you're interested in these kind of things, also make sure, let's say, to keep in mind that eventually EDI SNL does provide free pilots, but it's a pilot, so typically 3 months roughly, and it also takes some time on your side because we have to talk to some people to see and to, let's say, coordinate what should be monitored and what not.